week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate how to minimize the number of yarn tails you will have to weave in when knitting with wool. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. Now, there are lots of ways to weave in yarn tails, but before I cast on for a project, I think about ways I can minimize the number of yarn tails I will have to weave in later. When working with wool and other animal fibers, the felted join is a great solution. So let's get started. The first step of the felted join is to remove about half of the plies. So if you have a four ply yarn, you're going to take out 2. This is a 3 ply yarn, so I'm going to remove just 1 of the plies, and I'm going to remove it for 2 or 3 inches. And I'm going to break the yarn just by pulling it. This breaks pretty easily, some are a little harder. And then I'll do the same for this one. Wool felts when you apply moisture, agitation, and temperature change. Now, when the temperature change is hot, then it felts much more readily because the scales of the wool, there are little scales on fibers of wool, and as they heat up, those scales open up, and as they rub back and forth across each other, they're more likely to catch and hold on to each other, and that's what the felting is. So what we do is we moisten our hand, or you can either dip these in water, or you can just lick your hand and rub the strands together. And that rubbing together creates the agitation and also heats the wool up. So it allows that agitation then to really cause the 2 yarns to felt together. So you're overlapping the 2 parts that have been thinned out, which will create a strand of yarn when felted that's about the same thickness as the rest of the yarn. So the part that's really important to felt are where the 2 tips are, where the tip of the yarn meets the other strand of yarn at either end. It's a little bit less important that these get completely felted together. My preference is to really felt things as much as I can, but you don't have to. So I'm licked my hand, and now I'm going to rub these together. And now I'm going to do the same thing down at this end. So the part in the middle isn't quite felted. I can do some felting there. Might be a little gentler with it. It does tend to get stiff. If you fully felt this together, it will get a little stiff, but I find that even though it might be a little stiff when you're knitting with it, once you wash and block it later, it tends to soften up a bit. So just look to see that my ends are kind of felted together. And now I'll be able to knit with this. Now you want to be careful that you're not pulling on the yarn as you're knitting with it so that you're pulling these apart from each other. So be kind of gentle as you're knitting, maintain your tension, but be kind of gentle as you're knitting these two, this bit of the yarn together. So an alternative to laying these 2 ends parallel to each other is to fold them back on themselves. So I'm going to wet these 2 ends, and then I'll show you what I mean. So what you want to do in this case is fold them back over on themselves like this and like this. So that will link the 2 yarns together. So I did moisten these, but I'm going to moisten my palm as well. You can see that they're sort of loosely felted together, but because they're linked going in reverse like this, I feel like it locks the 2 strands together a little bit more for when you're knitting with them. Now, this option is also nice if you are changing colors while you're doing the felted join. That can really reduce the number of ends if you're working in stripes. If you felt the new color to the old color right at the edge. You can join two balls anywhere in a row or round when you use the felted join. You don't have to limit yourself to an edge. For large projects, you can eliminate nearly all the ends, except for those where you join to a finished edge or have stitches placed on a stitch holder where there's no tail to join to, and of course at the cast on and bind off. This join does not work with plant fibers, synthetic fibers, or animal fibers that are machine washable. This join works best with single ply yarns and smooth plied yarns, but it is not ideal for yarns with a silky sheen. Felting will dull that sheen. If you have any comments or questions about today's video, you can leave a comment below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.